So we're in chapter 16. In chapter 2, Srila Prabhupada wrote, another part of sadhana bhakti is called raganuga. Raganuga refers to the point at which, by following the regulated principles, one becomes a little more attached to Krishna and executes devotional service out of natural love. For example, a person engaged in devotional service may be ordered to rise early in the morning and offer artik, which is a form of deity worship. In the beginning, by the order of his spiritual master, one rises early in the morning and offers artik, but then he develops real attachment. When he gets this attachment, he automatically tries to decorate the deity and prepare different kinds of dresses and thinks of different plans to execute his devotional service nicely. Although it is within the category of practice, this offering of loving service is spontaneous. So the practice of devotional service, sadhana bhakti, can be divided into two parts, namely regulated and spontaneous. So this paragraph so beautifully describes how our regulated practice transforms or evolutes into spontaneous practice. It's not a you could say an artificial development or change that one is practicing, and then all of a sudden one day one becomes spontaneous in one's service. No, rather it is it is the natural and spontaneous progression from the regulated practice into the spontaneous practice. And here, Prabhupada, we can see he's referring directly to the morning program, that in the beginning, we get up and we attend the morning program out of duty, that my spiritual master has told me that I should do this, and thus we do it. But later on, we do this not out of duty, but simply out of love. That I'm doing this, but I'm doing this for Krishna. I'm not doing this for my own senses. I'm not doing this for my mind. I'm doing this because I love Krishna. I'm doing this because I want to do it, because I like doing it. And the spiritual master inspires that conviction, but that those activities are done out of natural attraction. Spontaneous love of Krishna, as exhibited by the Vrishnis and the denizens of Vrindavan, is eternally existing in them. In the stage of devotional service, where regulated practice principles are followed, there is no necessity of discussing this love, for it must develop of itself at a more advanced stage. So many devotees complain that why in our ISKCON, we don't discuss these Rasika things as much as other, Gaudiya Sampradayas or other people might do. So here Prabhupada is saying that when we're at the stage of regulated practice, we don't have to discuss these advanced stages of love in great detail, because it develops of itself at a more advanced stage. And though we don't have it, but we sometimes see this in the advanced devotees, that within their heart they get realization. It automatically develops. It's not something that is artificially imposed upon the soul. It will develop, and it must develop at a more advanced stage. So we need to perform the activities so that it develops. We need to perform our activity with earnestness and honesty before it actually will develop. And this is why we see here in the Nectar devotion that Srila Prabhupada spent 16 chapters discussing sadhana bhakti, Vaidhi sadhana, and then Raganuga. Of those 16, the first, 14 were Vaidhi sadhana. And then he discusses in chapters 17 and 18 Bhava Bhakti. 2 chapters for pure love of God, Bhava Bhakti, which is so unlimited. He discusses only 2 chapters. And then Prema Bhakti, he discusses in 1 chapter. Like the whole spiritual world is, engulfed in Prema Bhakti, but he discusses only 1 chapter. In this, Easter week, obviously later on he does discuss it more. But why? Because once you have Prema, there's nothing much to discuss. On that stage, you already know what to do. Like on that stage, the heart is already attracted to Krishna. The place where the mind and intelligence need to be trained and, and you could say perfected, the practice needs to be perfected, is at the stage of Vaidhi sadhana bhakti. Because that's the stage where all the the reasons and the evidence and the information and all these things are needed for our progress, and it's a very important stage. Without doing that, we cannot move to the other stages. And same thing in Chaitanya Charitamrita. You see on points of philosophy, difference between Mahavishnu and Sadashiva and all these philosophical points. Srila Prabhupada has purports that are sometimes the size of books. 20 to 30 pages, he'll discuss the whole detail of all of Krishna and his incarnations and his energies. And then you'll have section in the Chaitanya Charitamrita speaking about Srimati Radharani's love for Krishna, or Lord Chaitanya's spontaneous love for Krishna, that are so difficult to understand, that are so deep, and Srila Prabhupada does not even have a purport. Why? Because if we're on that stage to understand those things, to appreciate those things, a purport will not be necessary. But the purport is necessary when we need our faith established, when Shraddha is not there, when our bhajana kriya is not going well. That is the stage where it's necessary the most. At every stage, we need the guidance of the spiritual master. In the higher stages, it's coming from within the heart. The spiritual master is directly guiding. In the initial stage, we cannot access the Lord or the spiritual master within the heart. So it comes through the books and the instructions. At the same time, those in the highest stage, they relish reading these books of the acharyas and reading Srila Prabhupada's purports, because those same purports will be read in a deeper way by someone at the higher stage. But the overall point being that intimate activities of love for Krishna and his intimate activities of loving pastimes are not discussed in detail in the initial stages, but the focus is on sadhana bhakti, on performing the activities of devotional service for our tangible progress in devotional service. Keep in mind that while Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti is an advanced stage, it is in the realm of practice, not perfection. So even this stage is still in the realm of practice, not perfection. Ragatmikaika nishthaye vrajavasi janadaya tesham bhavaptaye lubdho bhaved atradhikaravan. That person who is greedy for attaining a bhava similar to that of the inhabitants of Braja is qualified for Raganuga Bhakti. So what is the qualification? Intense greed. Same thing like pure devotional service we read. What's the qualification? The greed to have it. That's all we need is the desire. But in this case, the desire is to attain the bhava, the mood similar to that of an inhabitant of Braja. But how will we get that greedy desire? Only once our mind and heart is purified. Otherwise, that desire, the genuine desire, cannot manifest. And one who has that desire must be eligible now for Raganuga Bhakti because they've perfected Vaidhi sadhana bhakti. Special natural appreciation of the descriptions of a particular pastime of Godhead indicates the constitutional position of a living entity. Wow. Chaitanya Purport CC Adi 434. Special natural appreciation of the descriptions of a particular pastime of Godhead indicates the constitutional position of a living entity. So even I think last time someone was asking, we were discussing that how do we know when we know we're ready, or how do we know what our eternal constitutional position is? How do we know the Swarupa? Srila Prabhupada writes that the spiritual master reveals from within the heart. At the same time also that revelation is confirmed with a natural attraction to a particular pastime. We're never satiated in hearing it. We keep on hearing it. We are relishing it. We love it. When an advanced realized devotee hears about the affairs of the devotees of Vrindavan, in the mellows of Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya, he becomes inclined in one of these ways, and his intelligence becomes attracted. Indeed, he begins to covet that particular type of devotion. When such covetousness is awakened, one's intelligence no longer depends on the instructions of Shastra, revealed scripture, or on logic and argument. So once, now it's a matter of the heart, right? One doesn't need any logic or reason to do this. Like when you really love someone, then it's a matter of the heart then. No one has to convince you, you should take care of them, it's your duty, it's your dharma. No, it's a reciprocation of love. In the same way, when we covet, Prabhupada uses this word covet, Krishna's service in one of these rasas, there's, as I was mentioning before, there's no longer any need to depend on instructions of the Shastra or logic and argument. Those things still exist, but we don't depend on that. It's now a minor detail. The appearance of that greed is indicated when the intelligence does not depend on rules of scripture and logic. After realizing to some degree the sweetness of their love through the process of hearing from the scriptures. One realizes the sweetness of their love, meaning their love, Radha Krishna's love, through the process of hearing the scriptures. As soon as the greed manifests in him for attaining a bhava similar to that of the Vrajavasis, and he develops an inclination for Raganuga Bhakti, the practitioner of Raganuga Bhakti does not depend any longer on scriptural rules and logic. However, wherever that greed has appeared, it is understood that the person must have studied the scriptures in order to attain that greed. It is also necessary to study the scriptures in order to understand the proper sadhana for Raganuga Bhakti. So, yes, see, it's so nicely put here that scriptures are no longer needed, yet they are needed to reach that stage. It's necessary to read the scriptures. And devotees on this stage are, in fact, even though it's not necessary, but the reality is that the devotees on this stage are, in fact, the most enthusiastic to study the scriptures. They're constantly discussing and reading Krishna's pastimes because the scriptures and the Lord's narrations in the scriptures, the pastimes of the Lord's in the scriptures, is continuously nurturing that mood of Raganuga Bhakti. So they are reading and hearing not just even the pastimes, but the philosophy, the books, just like Shukadev Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit. Both of them were far beyond Raganuga Bhakti, yet they're so eager and so much relishing hearing and speaking Srimad Bhagavatam. Why is that? They were Raganuga Bhakti. They could just be, only discussing those leelas which they are part of in the spiritual world. No, because it's all absolute. It's that the same Lord that is being glorified. It's that same Krishna who they are in love with that's being glorified. So they're not just doing it for us. They were hearing and speaking Srimad Bhagavatam for their own relishing also. Though they don't need it, they are the most enthusiastic because they need it. They become fully, you could say, inspired, and they relish and nurture that Raganuga Bhakti, that Bhava, that Prema through the scriptures. So this is kind of the progression here. By hearing Krishna's pastimes again and again, we start to taste the sweetness of those pastimes. From the sweetness of those pastimes, the greed for entering into those pastimes develops, and that greed leads to a decrease in scriptural regulation, where one is so absorbed in those pastimes and serving Krishna that the more, you could say, rudimentary regulations become a detail. They're still followed, but one is interested in the bhava. Someone may argue that particularly Srila Prabhupada and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta warned that the awakening of one's eternal specific position happens only to those who are liberated. At the same time, they both, following Sarup Damodar Goswami, Sarup Damodar and Rupa Goswamis, consistently present Raganuga as a sadhana done by sadhakas. Therefore, the purity that almost always is necessary for an awakening is not absolute. So normally, in order to attain this stage, one has to become fully purified. One is liberated, and then one realizes one's eternal position. But in the case of Srila Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta, they gave it to us from the beginning, part of sadhana. And that's why the elements of our sadhana practice, as you will see, are intertwined with the Raganuga Bhakti. A very good example of that is the morning Tulsi prayers that we sing to Mother Tulsi, where in the words of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, we're begging Tulsi Maharani that please, Mora e Abhilash, Bilash Kunja Devas, please give me residence in the Kunjas of Vrindavan, right? So that is something that we are not qualified to ask Krishna. What qualification do we have to ask Krishna? Please give me residence in the Kunjas of Vrindavan. But no, we can ask because the Goswamis are asking. We are simply repeating their words. So, but that's Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti, and they've given that to us from the near beginning. So we gradually start to bring those elements in. But we are not just doing out of duty, but also out of love. Spontaneity starts to develop. In this connection, Srila Prabhupada defines the stage for the eligibility for Raganuga Sadhana in the Nectar Devotion, chapter 16. In following the regulated principles of devotional service, there is a stage called Anartha Nivritti, which means the disappearance of all material contamination. Anartha Nivritti is a stage in the middle of practice. It is not a stage of perfection. From the point of view of a gross materialist, such persons are liberated and free from all material desires. So one is past anartha nivritti. When one is in the Raganuga sadhana, one is passing it. From the point of view of the eternally perfected Ragatmika Bhaktas, such persons are in a gradual process of awakening and still harbor some subtle anarthas. Srila Prabhupada writes of the Raganuga sadhakas, there's a gradual development of the ambition to become like a particular devotee. And this activity is called Raganuga. We note the word gradual in Prabhupada's statement. So there is a gradual development. It's just like the 2 slides before we were discussing. It's not sudden, it's not overnight. Vaidhi sadhana is turning into Raganuga. And there's still subtle anarthas. So even in that advanced stage where you know your relationship with Krishna, one can still have subtle anarthas. But that is very subtle now. It's very less. And just a few things are left. But that's why we are advancing even in higher stages. We sometimes get confused, or we wonder that this person is such an advanced devotee. How could they make this mistake? Because even advanced devotees can have subtle anarthas that are gradually purified. Because advanced devotee also has many categories. Even amongst advanced devotees, there are more advanced devotees who are free of even more subtle anarthas. Only at the stage of prema are we completely purified. Because Bharat Maharaj was on the stage of bhava, and yet even he fell down because he had a subtle anartha. So at every stage, one can fall unless one is at prema bhakti, but Raganuga, it has reduced. In a lecture that Srila Prabhupada gave on the Nectar devotion, November 2nd, 1972, in Vrindavan, Prabhupada says, transcendental platform means above the 3 modes of material nature, which is called Brahma Bhuta. Without being in liberated stage, nobody can be engaged in devotional service. Bhakti begins when one is actually liberated from the influence of the modes of material nature. Actually, we are in the material state, but we are being trained up. But even in the training period, if one is sincere and serious, he's liberated. He's liberated. It is so nice. Krishna consciousness is so nice that even in the training period, although he's not mature, so it's both, right? One is liberated, yet one is not liberated. Anarthas are still there, but one is liberated. Because actually we were discussing this last night in a discussion on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the holy name. And someone asked, well, so many times it's said that, by saying the name, one gets so much pious credit that one cannot even do enough sinful activities, not just in the past, but in the present or in the future, to become sinful again. The holy name burns away all sinful activities. Just by taking the name, one gets liberation, one's liberated. By reading certain pastimes, one gets pure love for Krishna, it is said. Just by hearing Chaitanya Bhagavat, there's one, so many passages. Just by hearing this, one gets pure love for Krishna. It'll say, even with an inattentive mind, even if one is yawning and one says the name of Lord Ram, one gets that. So it says, how are these statements true? They are true because at that point, the process has begun. The process of becoming liberated has begun. So one is liberated. One is liberated in the sense that the process of liberation has become. He's liberated. He's basically liberated. Still some purification needed, but he's now liberated. In this connection, we should be careful about the so-called Siddha Pranali. The Siddha Pranali process is followed by a class of men who are not very authorized and who have manufactured their own way of devotional service. They imagine that they have become associates of the Lord simply by thinking of themselves like that. This external behavior is not at all according to the regulated principles. The so-called Siddha Pranali process is followed by the Prakrita Sahajya, a pseudo-sect of so-called Vaishnavas. In the opinion of Rupa Goswami, such activities are simply disturbances to the standard way of devotional service. This is the Sahajya, simply the trying to imitate. Sahajya means to take something that is very exalted and to make it cheap. So while by Lord Chaitanya's mercy, we have access to these higher realms. That access is through the mercy of the Acharyas. But the Siddha Pranali, like, for example, the Tulsi Puja, repeating the words of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the Siddha Pranali, they try to reach that stage by cheap imitation, by manufacturing their own way of devotional service, by trying to imitate, ecstatic symptoms, roll on the ground while they're chanting, but there's no real emotion there. Or to discuss Krishna's intimate pastimes with the gopis and the Gita Govinda while still smoking ganja, right? That is Siddha Pranali. But it's not even just very extreme. Even so-called, not so-called, even just good normal devotees can display these symptoms. And what is the key symptom? Wanting to engage in the process without following the rules and regulations. The devotees, some devotees say, "Oh, just chant," but there's no need to, no, no need to, follow the four regulated principles or read Srila Prabhupada's books. Just doing kirtan is fine. Just, um, just chant. That's enough. That's enough, but that's not our process, right? So that saying that one can engage in these activities without the regulated principles, without following the process given by our acharyas, is sahajya. It's cheap, making the process cheap. So what is Siddha Pranali? It's being defined here. Ekadasha Bhava, 11 elements of one's spiritual identity, mentioned in Harinam Chintamani and Jaiva Dharma Bhaktivinoda Thakur as a bona fide process for developing the Siddha Deha. So here's a real Siddha Pranali. There's, in the Harinam Chintamani and Jaiva Dharma, there's a bona fide process that is given. And these books are very nice. They're read by the devotees. We can read them if we have an interest in this. The Harinam, I haven't read the Jaiva Dharma, well, just few small sections of it. It's a very technical book, actually, just the Jaiva Dharma. So it's not something that makes it cheap. It's actually like, wow, this is like very technical. But Harinam Chintamani is very, very easy to read. And most of the book is talking about the 10 offenses against the holy name. And it says that if you can overcome the 10 offenses against the holy name, then you develop pure love for Krishna and your Siddha and all these things. So really, the idea is that we just have to overcome the 10 offenses against the holy name. Details given in the Gaura Govinda Smarana Padati by Dhyana Chandra Goswami. So Dhyana Chandra Goswami, very famous Goswami. He's given further details in this book, not mentioned in the works of the 6 Goswamis. At the time of Varana Dasha, the second stage of meditation, the Guru gives the disciple his identity as a manjari with specific details. So like I mentioned, it comes from the spiritual master. When we are on a higher stage called Varana Dasha, some details are given in this Siddha Pranali process. However, Prabhupada didn't institute the Siddha Pranali process, even though even some of our acharyas, they do it. But Prabhupada didn't see the need because as Kali Yuga progresses, people have a tendency of making these things cheap. And as we read so many times in so many passages, Prabhupada is saying that when the time is right, it automatically comes within the heart. We don't have to, like before the spiritual master would reveal it at a certain point. It's like, this is your Swarupa. But now it's not so much necessary because if it's revealed when we're not really ready, then we may advertise it, make it cheap. One should specifically engage himself in the type of devotional service for which he has a natural aptitude. How to practice Raganuga. Engage in which one has a natural aptitude. For example, one person may have a particular interest in hearing, another may have a particular interest in chanting, and another may have a particular interest in serving in the temple. So these or any of the other 6 different types of devotional service, remembering, serving, praying, engaging in some particular service, being in a friendly relationship, or offering everything in one's possession, should be executed in full earnestness. In this way, everyone should act according to his particular taste. So this is, I think, a very amazing passage. I particularly really appreciate this because sometimes we feel very guilty. I feel like, I'm not attracted to or engaged in this service, but something else I'm doing, I'm more attached to that. And at the same time, it may be due to our material conditioning. But on the other hand, Prabhupada here is saying that uh, whatever we have a natural attraction for, it's okay. But then do that more. Increase it more and more. And then it'll develop into pure love for Krishna one day. Right? So some devotees, you see, they're naturally attracted to deity worship. Like they're just into it. It attracts them and they're just like on the altar. They can't get off the altar. It's just so nice. And others are not so attracted to deity worship, but they're attracted to chanting, to hearing, for preaching. Book distribution is their thing more than deity worship. And some who are doing deity worship are not so attracted to, going on the streets and distributing books. And both sides may feel very guilty that, oh, I'm of their own accord that, what is it? I have no love for Krishna. I'm not attracted to this. But here it's being said that no, Krishna has made us with different types of inclinations, and the key thing is to be continuously engaged. Our attraction for particular services may differ, and we cannot judge one devotee and another based upon their attraction for service. So a nice example is like His Holiness Jayadvaita Maharaj, pure devotee of the Lord, and he is engaged in editing Prabhupada's books throughout his, spiritual career. And another pure devotee of the Lord is engaged in doing festivals. Another pure devotee of the Lord is engaged in establishing temples. But they're all doing all of those things, but they're all engaged in their particular things. Now, we cannot say that one person is more advanced than the other. They have their natural inclination. Both services are equally necessary. But the advancement can be judged by the intensity of the absorption, right? So if I'm sleeping, 10 hours a day, and another devotee is sleeping 6 hours a day and continuously engaged in devotional service, you can understand this other devotee is more advanced than myself who is sleeping so much. And not just sleeping, but also, in sense gratification. One can assess advancement through that process, but not by the type of devotional service. In fact, sometimes one engages intentionally in one type because that is an effort to practice Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti. That this is what I'm somehow very deeply attracted to. I want to do it so much, so I become deeply attached to Krishna. Among the 64 angas of bhakti, even for those practicing Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, under the heading of servitorship, devotees should serve the Lord according to their taste and ability. According to their taste and ability. Also, offering a favorite article includes doing for the Lord activities one enjoys. In Vaidhi, such a choice of service is often related to one's temporal mood and ability. In Raganuga, that choice is more about what nourishes the development of one's inner meditation on a specific eternal service. So one will choose that service not on an external basis of what I like or don't like, but oh, this will nourish my internal inner meditation, my inner cultivation of a specific eternal service. And having said that, it's okay to develop a particular activity that we're interested in and doing that more. Simultaneously, we all need to do the standard practices of devotional service, like Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, like our morning sadhana. Why? Because it's like school. A good example, a good metaphor for this is teaching children that children have to learn all the subjects, right? Like my daughter Sita, she's attracted more to English and the arts than math. But she still needs to learn math, right? She still needs to do some basic, all the subjects. In the same way, the devotee of the Lord has to follow the rules and regulations and all these things that basically, but then the way to progress for a child is that the thing that they're attracted to, they develop on that. They know a basic knowledge of everything, but then they go deep, they advance, they do a degree in that area which attracts their heart. In the same way, the devotee is acting in the regulated practice of devotional service, except, on very high stages of prema, where like Lord Nityananda would not even wear clothes. He was so much in the swoon of ecstatic love, he couldn't figure out if he's wearing clothes or not. So that's a different stage. But on our stage, one does all the basic duties, but then a particular activity that we like, we do that all the time. Like, that then you really get deep into it. So giving the previous example, following through with that we gave, book distribution. The book distributors needs to wake up for Mangalarti, he can chant his rounds and also do some deity worship and serve the Vaishnavas. And at the same time, their main service for the day, 8 hours a day, they're going out and distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. So they're doing everything, but then that becomes their particular absorption. The devotee who is attracted to deity worship is sometimes going out on Harinam book distribution, maybe once a week when the whole temple goes. They are serving the Vaishnavas, must serve the Vaishnavas. They're getting up, chanting, all these things. But then 6 to 8 hours a day, they're on the altar, dressing the deities and cooking for them. And that's their natural, that's their mood. So we all have, you could say our warm-up practices to keep us in line. And then we have specific things that increase our devotion. The devotee should always think of Krishna within himself and should choose a very dear devotee who is a servitor of Krishna in Vrindavan. One should constantly engage in topics about the servitor and his loving relationship with Krishna. And one should live in Vrindavan if one is physically unable to go to Vrindavan. He should mentally live there. The advanced devotee who is inclined to spontaneous loving service should follow the activities of a particular associate of Vrindavan, in Vrindavan. He should execute service externally as a regulative devotee, as well as internally from his self-realized position. Thus, he should perform devotional service both externally and internally. Prabhupada says this. And it's a very key point. This is why the Raganuga Bhakta is often not spotted as a Raganuga Bhakta, because externally they're doing the same activities, the regulative activities, but internally they're developing that mood. How to practice Raganuga. Think of Krishna. Choose a devotee who is a very dear servitor in a relationship similar to what has awakened within oneself, and discuss this devotee's activities. Physically or mentally, live in Vrindavan. Meditate on the relationship of service between Krishna and this devotee. Do not manifest this meditation externally. Externally behave as a neophyte. Engage in the specific angas of bhakti according to one's taste that help to develop the specific relationship one aspires for within the Lord. Gradually, one will develop the internal sentiments of the devotee one is following. So this is a nice summary of what we have been talking about. This internal cultivation is very wonderful. And you see devotees do that. Our tendency, or my tendency, I should say, is to focus more on the external activity, externals. A devotee in the neophyte stage is concerned totally so much about, what's going on in the temple. This devotee did this, and they're not letting this happen, and they're not doing this and that. So we're doing devotional service. We say, well, this is all service for Krishna, but the focus is on the external, which is hard to change. It's trying to change others, trying to change the temple, change the process, change ISKCON, the whole of ISKCON, trying to change GBC. The focus is on the external. But on a more advanced stage, the focus is on the internal. As we advance, the big problem is my relationship with Krishna. Why isn't that increasing? How can I increase that love for Krishna? The focus is on the internal. The external is one externally performs the activities of devotional service to keep our heart and mind in check, and to set an example for others and for oneself. But the internal is more important. So when we get very disturbed in things in our devotional life, we can remind ourselves about this, that what's more important? The internal is more important. And we see that devotees who are too much concerned about the external activities sometimes fall down, or they leave ISKCON, or they have things, because the focus is the external. When that's not going well, then the whole bhakti is dependent on the external. When that, if it's based on that, when that's not going well, the bhakti shakes. But the devotees who are fixed on the internal, externally, if things still go wrong, it doesn't matter, because their internal bhakti is fixed. Follow conduct given by Rupa Goswami, the 64 angas of bhakti, particularly focusing on what suits one's taste and relationship with the Lord. With the physical body, that's what one is doing. One is doing the 64 angas of bhakti, sadhana bhakti, but unnoticed to others, what one is also doing is performing those 64 angas that particularly suit one's taste and relationship with the Lord. The Siddha body is to identify as a cowherd boy, a cowherd girl, etc. Follow the conduct of the residents of Braja in meditation. So physically, one is with the physical body, one is doing this. With one's spiritual body, the Siddha body, one is has identified a particular Vrajvasi and following their conduct in meditation. There are two types: Kamanuga, devotion in conjugal mood, and Sambandhanuga, that aspires for one of the other rasas. Such aspiration does not depend on the current body, male or female. Examples are given of males who aspire to be Krishna's gopis, and women can aspire to be cowherd boys. So, what are the two types of mood that one tries to emulate? One is the mood of conjugal love, Kamanuga. So, of the gopis, manjaris, uh, the assistants of different types of assistants of the gopis, the queens of Dwarka. These are all conjugal moods. And then Sambandhanuga is all the other rasas: friendship, parental, servitorship. Obviously one could divide these further, but Rupa Goswami kind of makes them into two types or categories. Because in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, it's very common to aspire in the mood that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught. Gopi, Bharatu, Kamalu, Das, Das, Anudas, following in the footsteps of the gopis. But even followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu may develop moods other than in conjugal rasa, like becoming a coward boy. Now, regarding Kamanuga, aspiring to be a coward girl or a queen, Rupa Goswami writes, Rirang sam shustu kurvanyo vidhi margena sevate kevalena eva satada mahi shitvam iyat pure. A person who serves on the path of Vaidhi Bhakti with a desire for a conjugal relationship with the Lord and a high position, but without desire for the gopis type of love, after some time becomes a queen in Dwarka. So these two types of Kamanuga, Raganuga Bhakti, or two types of Madhurya Bhakti, are Sambhogecha Mayi Bhakti, is characterized by enjoying conjugally with Krishna. Tadbhave Chatmika Bhakti is characterized by desiring the sweet mood of love of the Kama, Rupa, Siddha devotees. Relish the conjugal loving affairs of the Lord. So, um, so one is to be actually part of it, one by enjoying conjugally with Krishna. The other is to relish the sweet mood of love. So that is a different type. So not all devotees actually engage in the conjugal love for Krishna, but all devotees can relish that mood. Other types of Raganuga. So now we talked about Kamanuga, which was the conjugal, now Sambandhanuga, which was all the other types. Lubdhair Vatsalya Sankhyaadav Bhakti Karyatra Sadhakai Brajendra Subaladinam Bhavacheshtita Mudraya. Practicing devotees, greedy for parental, friendly, or servant relationships, perform this bhakti with indications of the behavior and mood of Nanda, parent, Subala, friend, and others. It is better to aspire to follow in the footsteps of an exalted devotee and serve them than to want that position directly. For wanting the position directly can become impersonal. So I just thinking of this that, well, by reading all this, we may want that, this is what I want to develop. So now external service, my seva in the temple is not so important. It's all the internal thing. But that also is not right because there's a phrase that in ISKCON is popularized, and maybe it comes from Prabhupada, but it says seva now, samadhi later. Right? Seva now, samadhi later. That the mood of humility is not to think that I'm at that stage. Right? The mood of humility is to accept the descending process, not the ascending process, which means that I will engage in my service so nicely that Krishna's mercy is attracted. I will glorify the devotees so nicely that Krishna's mercy is attracted. And so that I can become the servant of their servant, of the servant of the servant of the servant. So we should never aspire to become Mother Yashoda. That is impersonalism. Impersonalism is us desiring to be God, right? That's impersonalism. When I say I am God or I want to become God, that's Mayavad. Well, when I say that I want to be a great devotee, that's also impersonalism. Because the devotees are the energies of God, they're the servants of God. That's also impersonalism. What right do we have to think in that way? So our aspiration is to follow in the footsteps of those devotees so that we can become their servants. We should desire to serve them than to want to that position directly. We should aspire to follow in their footsteps so we can develop the mood that they're showing of the servant of the servant of the servant. And we can develop that bhava, that mood, but not that we want to become them. That is not right. So we aspire to become their servant. The point that I was mentioning before about the internal cultivation is that we have to develop our internal bhakti. And if things aren't going well externally, we should not be disturbed, but focus more on the internal. That's the point. But it's not that one does not do one's service properly, because there's a deep connection between the external and the internal, as we saw. When we're internally there, we will do our external services in that mood, and that becomes very manifest. Just like devotees who are very fixed up and nicely serving the Lord, when you taste their prasadam, you can taste this is something special. So there's that connection between the internal and the external. When a devotee is very advanced, they feed the other devotees. They serve them prasadam with so much perfection. When devotees are very advanced and they are, carrying out their activities, of preaching activities, their deity worship activities, their service activities so nicely, one can see it becoming manifest. The cause of Raganuga. So now we looked at the eligibility, now we're looking at the cause. Krishna tad bhakta karunya matra labhai kahetuka pushti marga taya kaishchit yam gochyate. The mercy of Krishna and his devotees is the only cause of attaining Raganuga Bhakti. See, this is why we have to do our service nicely, because that's how we get the mercy. And the mercy is what is the cause of attaining Raganuga Bhakti. Some call this type of devotion Pushti Marg. Pushti Marg talks about prapatti, or surrender. We must just surrender ourselves. And that is the way of getting pure love for Krishna. Just surrender. I just see this image here, right? Look at how intensely these devotees, they're looking at Prabhupada like, who is this person, right? And surrendering themselves, that by getting that mercy, it's the secret of success in spiritual life, right? Satisfaction of the spiritual master is a secret of success in spiritual life. And that is the end. So that's actually a perfect end, because one must get that mercy, and that is the cause of getting this Raganuga Bhakti. Okay, this is a very long chapter discussion. We can take some comments or questions. Already there's some questions someone raised. And then I think maybe Sakhi Sali Mataji. Yeah.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dharmat Pranam. Thank you for the wonderful class as usual, Prabhuji. I want to say something relating this slide you had put up, where it says that in Vaidhi, such choice of service is often related to one's temporal mood and ability. And in Raganuga, that choice is more about what nourishes the development of one's inner meditation on the specific eternal service. So while you were explaining this, I just wanted to say that when we go for our sevas, like for the Raj Bhog Seva or the Sandhya Bhog Seva, you know, we have these meetings regularly, like every 3 months, 6 months, where they keep reminding us what we should be doing and not just going and, you know, behaving bad there, or, you know, so we have to make our choice. So always they recommend that we should make a choice of making something which we don't know, not that something which we know. Because when I go and make something, like my specialty is making in salads, you know, so I love to make salads. That's what I like to do. So that's my move. Like I like to do, and I'm able to make that very nicely. So when I go and say I'm going to make this salad, it's like I get a little sense of pride that I make very nice salads. So I'm going to offer this to the Lord, and you know. But when we are getting this guidance from seniors, when they tell us that no, we should not make something which you know, try making something that you don't know and take guidance from the seniors there at that particular moment. So that is time we learn and we humble ourselves. Oh yes, I don't know, so I should just follow the instructions and do as they say. So that's what nourishes us inside, you know, from within. So this is what just came to my mind exactly when what you were, you know, explaining with this slide. Yes, so thank you.
That's very nice. Thank you for that comment. No, that's a really nice point, that how you're kind of practically applying this principle in a specific service. And I was thinking that it can be kind of like, that's the thing, depending on what our purpose or mood or intention is. Uh, it can kind of go both ways, where in one case we are, it's so important, such a nice way, that we are continuously taking guidance from the devotees, and that reminds us of our humble position, that, you know, I need to learn from other devotees, and by doing something or cooking something that I don't know how to cook, it gives me the opportunity to learn from them and take guidance from them, and it keeps me humble. So that's, I mean, that's so much in Prabhupada and Lord Chaitanya's mood, such a perfect, you know, way to approach devotional service. Simultaneously, Prabhupada says that Krishna likes to be served by the same hands year after year. Why? Because when we do the same things over and over again for Krishna, we become very expert at them. And then it becomes more better. It becomes perfect. Like, you know, we start to, not that we are perfect, but we start to perfect. We start to perfect that service, and that's very pleasing to Krishna. Vaidhi sadhana is actually the process of perfecting the regulated practice, and by doing that, then it becomes spontaneous. So, like you were saying about salads, it becomes second nature to you. That same devotional service becomes spontaneous. So depends what stage we're on. Initial stage, we have to learn, keep learning new things, and on all stages, we have to take guidance of a devotee. We have to do our devotional service under the guidance of a devotee. But over time, also, we can perfect certain things, and we're still working under the guidance of a devotee. We're never thinking that I'm the doer and I should become proud, like you were mentioning. But we're still doing it under guidance, but Krishna is no longer something I'm experimenting on. I've already perfected these recipes, and now, after so much trial and error and messing up at home, when I'm coming at the temple, then I'm doing something that I can do really well, right? So it can kind of, the logic can go both ways based upon what our goal is. Because what reminded me of this is that at our temple, some devotees were utilizing the time of Mangalarti to practice, right? We actually have Anjaneya Prabhu here. So we were thinking this is a good time. There's very few people there, and devotees who didn't know like the rhythm of kartal or about singing, how to do it. We were, gradually learning, how to do it nicely. And our priest, Dhananjay Prabhu, he came and told me, he said, this is very nice, but you see, uh, the deities are not there to practice in front of, right? We have to practice at home. When we come to the deities, then we must, then we do nicely. So that reminded me that, well, okay, yes, for the service of Krishna, we have to prepare at home and then do it nicely in front of them when the curtains open, singing in terms of singing, and so all those factors, bhakti is so, you could say, so intricate. All those factors are very important. Thank you, Mataji, for sharing that. Really liked your comment. Yashoda Vatsala Prabhu.
Hey Krishna Prabhuji, Dandat Pranam. Thank you so much for this session. It's really eye-opening for me. And yeah, like always, try to find out my comfort because I know something and I try to do that. So that is actually getting into more of Vaidi. But then, thank you for explaining in more detail, like how the Raganuga would be,
Mm,
to understand what nourishes my development, through my meditation and all. So on the same line, Prabhuji, actually, there was one slide related to eligibility where
mm,
Prabhupada and Srila Bhakti's Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur warns about the liberated person. One
mm,
needs to be liberated, and then you explain that one need not be, liberated. I mean to say, one is still liberated if he is sincerely and fully, seriously following the practices,
mm,
and then it still continues to work on the anartha nivrutti. So it doesn't mean. So can you please clarify that it doesn't mean that anartha nivrutti will happen and then we will get into the next. So it is a continuous process of anartha nivrutti while we are one may be liberated, but
mm,
the continuous process of anartha nivrutti is there. Like,
mm.
is my understanding correct?
Yes. So, so one time Prabhupada was asked, so a devotee came to him and said, Prabhupada, how many pure devotees are in this movement? And Srila Prabhupada asked him, how many disciples do I have? And so he said, that's the number of pure devotees. So in the same way, one is liberated when one starts the process of devotional service, because the process has begun. But it's interesting that Prabhupada didn't say, well, how many people come to the temple? No, he said, how many disciples do I have? So anyone who has seriously started the process, is practicing the process, they are liberated, but soon to be liberated, right? They're liberated in the sense that now they're under Krishna's shelter. They're 2 steps away from liberation. But those 2 steps, we can complete that in 20 years, or we can complete that in 200 lifetimes. We can complete that in 200 lifetimes. One devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, he said, look, if the material world is designed in such a way that we will all go back to Godhead, because this is the purpose of the material world, then Srila Prabhupada, why do I need to practice devotional service? I mean, I'll eventually go back to Godhead through material nature slapping me, and I'll reach there because Krishna is most merciful. And Prabhupada said, yes, this is a fact. You can go back to Godhead. Um, you will go back to Godhead. But he said, but I will go back in this lifetime. You can go back after thousands of lifetimes, right? So How fast we go through the process of anartha nivritti, that is, removing the unwanted things in our heart, that is up to us. How slow we go, that is also up to us. A famous quote from Indra Prabhu, Indra Prabhu said, Krishna consciousness is a gradual process. And then he says, and we can make it as gradual as we like. Mm. So, so he was doing reverse logic here. His point was, it's a gradual process, but you can make it very gradual and then, make very less advancement. So we are liberated. Once we take the shelter of the spiritual master, Krishna says that I consider that myself as good as that person as good as myself. Krishna says, at the time of Diksha Kale, I'm forgetting the full verse, at the time of initiation, I accept that person as good as myself because they've taken formal shelter of a pure devotee, Krishna's pure devotee. So how can Krishna not accept them? But then the heart has to change. They've accepted, they're liberated now. But that doesn't mean the heart is ready. So how quickly we ready that heart is up to us. Ajamal gets liberation when he hears the holy name at the end of his life. Vishnudutas come. But then they take him to Haridwar, and there he performs devotional service, practices very intensely. Why does he practice intensely? Because he saw the Yamadutas. Not because he saw the Vishnudutas, that also, but because he saw the Yamadutas, and he saw how scary material life is, what hell is. He's like, I'm not going to take another chance in my existence. There's no way I want to go to that hellish planet. So let me just fully dedicate myself to devotional service. I don't care about anything else. I don't care what anyone says. I don't care if anyone gives me a position or not. I don't care what anyone is talking bad behind my back. I don't care if someone is, happy with me or sad with me. I'm just going to engage in devotional service. And because he practices with that conviction and intensity, he reaches the goal. Very soon, then, at the end of his life, the Vishnudutas come again and take him back. We are unable to practice with that. We are unable to practice with that intensity, and that's why we don't reach that goal. We don't have that conviction that Ajamal had after seeing the Yamadutas, and that's why we don't reach that. One god brother of mine, actually there was a few instances, but one in particular in South Africa, also had an Ajamal experience. They had a near-death experience. They got, in some accident or something, very near-death experience, and they saw the Yamadutas. This is true story. I know this is a genuine story. But then they survived it. It's like a near-death experience. And if you study near-death experiences, one fellow student at Oxford University who wasn't a devotee was studying this. And he said the most common vision that people have when they have a near-death experience is they see barking dogs and scary-looking people. And you see, that's what Ajamal saw. He saw, very scary, and the dogs. Bhagavatam describes that dogs come and they bite your body, and you get pulled. They put a chain around your neck, and the dogs drag you to hell. And so it's a very common revelation, seeing that. And so he saw this, and what he claims is that the Yamadutas told him that you're not qualified to go back right now because you're eating food that's been cooked by karmis. He liked to still eat at restaurants outside and this and that. And you're not seriously chanting. And so after that, he gets well again. And after that, you could see he saw something because his whole life changed. He became such a serious devotee. Like, he never missed his rounds again. He never, ate outside again. So by Krishna's mercy, we may get some experience that very quickly so that devotee is a good example. When he got initiated, he got liberated. But his anartha nivritti was going very slow. He wasn't taking it seriously. So Krishna gave him an experience that made it more serious. And that's then they actually reached liberation.
Haribol. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. And one slide was there related to the person that we need to follow. Yeah, that's for our guru, right, Prabhuji? Yeah.
Yes, our guru is always the person we follow, right? They are our life and soul, and that's their instruction is the life and soul of the disciple. and the Guru reveals the Swarupa. At the same time, the devotees around us and the other acharyas, they are given to us by the Guru, right? So we're taking shelter of them also, right? So the Guru's god brothers, right? The Guru's god brothers may have a very important part in our spiritual development. Why? Because the Guru gives us that society, that association. They may sometimes have even a more important impact in our spiritual life. Just like a devotee, they live in a community where it's there's another sadhu who regularly preaches there, and through that, they are getting deep inspiration. But if they're bona fide, if the Guru's bona fide and they're bona fide, then their purpose is one. They are one. They say Guru is one. So even other gurus are, because the principle is, the philosophical principle is that Guru is one. Why? Because they're saying and doing the same thing, only for Krishna. Right? Everything they do is only for Krishna. So if Guru number 2 is doing only for Krishna, and our Guru is not present, then they can also impart that to us. So many practical examples are there, and we all have, so many devotees are there. They live in a community where their Guru doesn't visit regularly, or they no longer have the association with their Guru. Then their Guru's representative is there, and the Guru may even indicate through their words that you serve this person, you take guidance from that person. So Guru is, yes, it is a Guru, but Guru is not a very simple subject. Guru Tattva. Many devotees who are bona fide may be the helpers or the representatives of our spiritual master.
Great. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. It really helped.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Haripriya, we are ready for you.
Yes, so I had some points. Just a minute. Yes, so we can see that how there are like some parts of sadhana bhakti, and today we talked about raganuga bhakti, and raganuga bhakti is when one follows all the regulative principles and develops a little love for Krishna. And Raganuga Bhakti was exhibited by the Vrishnis and the denizens of Vrindavan. And the eligibility of Raganuga Bhakti is greed to have it. So if we have greed for Raganuga Bhakti, then we can have it. And then you talk about Siddha Pranali. So Siddha Pranali is when it's a process followed by a group of men who just imitate and make a new process of devotional service. So this is not a practice. And like as you said, like there are kind of like Sahajiya people who try to imitate other people. Although past acharyas followed this, still Prabhupada said that we should not follow this. We should not. He didn't recommend to follow this because he said that in Kali Yuga we have the habit to make everything cheap. So we will make it very much cheap if we ever have. And then we talk about the 64. You talk about 64 angas. You talk about the two of them on one of the slide. So like offering one's favorite thing to Krishna and serve Krishna according to one's taste and ability. And then and then then you talk about the process of how to practice Raganuga Bhakti. So first you need to discuss with the devotee who has the same type, who's on the same level by which you were inspired first. And then meditate upon the relationship of Krishna and the devotee, and then engage in the specific angas of the 64 angas of bhakti, and then gradually one will develop the internal sentiments of the devotee. And then we can see that physical body means like doing bhakti normally from outside, and siddha body means internal, like doing bhakti like internally. So like both of them are important. And then we know about uh, kamana kamananga, devotion
Anuga.
in devotion in conjugal relationship with Krishna, and sambandha nuga, uh, aspire from one of the other rasas. And then the practice is like the caution you said, like very important thing, that it is better to aspire to follow in the footsteps of an exalted devotee and serve them than to want that position directly, because wanting that position can be impersonal. Yeah. And then one last thing about the cause of Raganuga Bhakti. So the cause of Raganuga Bhakti is the mercy of Krishna and his devotees, is the only cause of Raganuga. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Yes, thank you, Haripriya. You always summarize it so nicely. And you're a good example of what we were talking about today, that what you like to do in devotional life, you expand it more. And you're such a good listener, and you're such a nice devotee, and of your own accord, you decided to summarize and share it with the devotees. And this is Krishna consciousness. No one asked you, no one told you to, you just did it yourself. Maybe your mother asked you, but the point is that you are doing it with so much gusto, and this is our process. So thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. We'll meet next week as normal. Hare Krishna, everyone.
Thank you very
Hare
much.
Krishna, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare
Thank you.
Krishna.
So
Hare
much,
Krishna. Thank you,
Prabhuji.
Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare